For example, it's a tricky word, example. I'll go to the word chamber later to look into the word itself, though just on a buzz, and I noticed a disturbance on a passenger causing a disturbance, talking to the driver as the bus was moving, and I just noticed his mannerisms were very loquial, in that I could see personalities from the town in his jaw movements specifically, though in his humour, in his expression as he was expressing himself to the driver as the bus was moving. A bad example, talking to the bus driver while the bus was moving. There's a sign up saying do not pass this point while the bus is in motion, implying do not disturb the driver. I can't remember the exact wording. And this man has loquial expression, and it's something I've considered. In detail, considering the Chinese and the herd mentality and the stories that we are told about the Chinese, though they are only stories as far as I'm concerned. I haven't been to China. I don't know any Chinese people. And I remember the stories of the Russians during the Great Cold War. That was a chess game. And whilst they might have queued for bread, we queued for bread, we still queue for bread. We queue for everything that we buy or obtain from the distributor. So I'm thinking about this loquial expression this man has, that's very much inherently part of personality in the town, though not throughout the town. Sort of division. There's many men who have this loquial expression, though I have not it, or maybe I have, though I haven't noticed it in my vlog, so I shall watch closer, perhaps while I review this vlog. So I'm thinking examples. I often said I'm a bad example, because when it comes to example setting, a good example narrows the possibilities. This is a good example and therefore everyone must follow this good example, whereas a bad example can be seen as a bad example and one can decide what is bad about it and can address that themselves, and therefore there is self-responsibility in that, rather than a good example is this is a good example and therefore it is the way it should be done, and woe betide anyone that dares not to exemplify themselves in that way. And there's that's Babel answering. There is some factual truth in. I don't quite understand the concept of pre-programming. I call it glamour. Glamour can be a subtle, subconscious, adapted, exemplified trait. The man might not realise that he is loquial in his expression, or he might know, though he might not know why he is loquial in his expression. Do I know? I don't know. I wouldn't be making the vlog perhaps if I did. Glamour. Anton LaVey explained glamour to me, and understood that I had been glamoured and I had adopted personality traits which could be called ego perhaps, consequential to the glamour. And I did notice once how a child appeared to be transfixed by my smoking of a cigarette, so much so that it was absorbing into his consciousness. And I realised my responsibility in that I had perhaps just put a spell on the child, and later in life it might find itself smoking and not know why it smokes. And if it ever was able to look back far enough, then it's unlikely that it would be able to, because it was a very young child, might be able to realise that it smoked because it saw me smoking and was glamoured by what it saw on a subconscious level, or even an unconscious level. I don't know. It's difficult, isn't it, being conscious of the unconscious? How could it be unconscious if you're conscious of it? So by definition, anything unconscious cannot be consciously be aware, awarely conscious of the unconscious. So there is responsibility, in fact, perhaps, maybe, in our expressive ways, that we should take care how we express ourselves in public. As we might be glamouring someone whom has been, well, would they have been prepared to be glamoured, or gets right down to the nature of programming, the nature of personality, ego, consciousness, and are we a clean slate when we come out of our mother's vaginas? I haven't studied the material that destiny provided for the realizations in that. They have made statements to that end, I believe, in inverted commas. Though in my own considerations I'd state, and have and do, that we are programming, becoming glamoured from our very first interaction with another human, and it is our interactions with other humans that create the personality, the ego, the subconscious acceptances that we allow ourselves to participate in and become, and therefore as. And so there's a responsibility in how we exemplify ourselves, how we carry ourselves, though to walk around from the perspective of being an example itself, and therefore one must be exemplary, an exemplar, exemplified, exempled. Well, it's questionable. It's questionable because of hierarchical considerations. See, this is why self-responsibility and equality and understanding, well, oneness must come into it. If it is oneness and we are all one, then all these traits are within us anyway. Recently I had an experience where everything I was encountering was an aspect of myself. I realised that during the encounters, though there are those men walking around that will place in your way and for their own ends, for their own hierarchical inequality. Because equality, you can't create equality, you only create inequality. Equality is, it just is. Inequality is what's being created. And the Chinese, do they run a totalitarian ship, as we are led to believe, consequent to their understanding of the herd mentality and the lack of responsibility? Perhaps inherent. Is it inherent? I doubt it, actually. Though we are brought up to be dependent upon the hierarchy. Other people give it different names: patriarchy, matriarchy, oligarchy. I want to do a quick look into the word example. In my chamber, my word chamber, example is a noun, someone or something that is a typical specimen. Something that illustrates a fact or rule, a person or pattern of behaviour, etc. As a model to be or not to be. I'd say it's as a model to be and not to be. Copy. Set a good example. There are those that would say so, although I might dispute that also. We'll get to that later. A punishment given, or the person punished, as a warning to others. Make an example of someone. For example, as an illustration or as an example. Etymology, 14th century, from French, from Latin, exempium. You might say that there wasn't any examples before the 14th century. It's the first time that consideration has come considerably forward as perhaps true, as it is merely a jest on my part to say that if the word didn't exist before the 14th century, there was no such thing then. And perhaps there wasn't, because it's all words. Professor Anton Corey will expound that too if you want to hear. He has playlists, though his considerations are only considerations of the past, and there are none of the future there that aren't including the past, and the future cannot include the past as it has been given so far. Though try creating a future that has no past in it, well, there will be examples in that will prove it to be incorrect. Time's up. Vlog daily, Anthony.